Hi there. I was going to write up some impressions on lesson two, and then I decided maybe I'd try doing it by video instead. So we'll see how this works. Overall, I've been very happy with the level of participation so far. Seeing the posts on the discussion site, people are finding a lot of interesting and thoughtful things to say, and that's been fun to read. Uh, I do want to remind you that when we're having the discussion things, the earlier you can make your initial post, the better it is because it gives people more time to uh, read through them and respond. So I know everybody is busy working on different schedules. We're trying to do this asynchronously, but when you can, if you can get your initial posting up earlier rather than later in the week, that is a helpful thing for everybody. That said, some comments. First, on the social responsibility discussion. Um, I think if I looked at kind of a general trend, it would appear that everybody is, at least to some degree, supportive of the notion of social responsibility and believes that companies have to do at least some things in terms of their position in society to be successful over the longer term. Although, as several of you pointed out, short term, there may well be profits to be made by being self serving or greedy, but that's not likely to work for the longer term profitability and survivability of a company. Um, However, I think there is some uncertainty or maybe just kind of wrestling with the notion of what does it really mean to be socially responsible. And I think often when we think of CSR, we tend to think of big picture kinds of things, big support for a cause, um, some of those kinds of things. But to me, a lot of social responsibility is really in smaller levels of things. It's paying living wages and giving benefits to employees. It's thinking about the notion of work life balanced, uh, making sure that employees share in the success of the company. Um, Many of those kind of things, making a commitment to local communities in small ways, day to day, rather than necessarily big and flashy ways. And I think to a large degree, that's kind of what the notion of conscious capitalism is. Now, whether you buy into the whole conscious capitalism movement or not, I think the ideas within that are kind of this day to day be a good citizen, and discussing some of the things that that might mean. So I believe it was Richard that posted a link to the current conscious capitalism site. Um, do remember that there are a couple of readings that I posted that may have gotten kind of missed or hidden. Uh, in fact, I switched the readings folder on the course content page in Blackboard to make it a little more prominent so you could see it. And I had posted a couple of articles from 5 or 10 years ago on the conscious capitalism movement. Um, you might want to take a look at to kind of see what people were thinking then and where it has gone to now. Um, I think you can also think of CSR, at least I always have, in terms of kind of the basic way a company approaches business and the way we promote the pursuit of profitability. Um, Another reading that I did post, don't know if anyone looked at, but it was actually the very first article that I wrote, um, asked kind of a question of what are ethical profits, uh, what is an ethical strategy, and tries to compare kind of the pursuit of profitability through industry structure things, something that we're talking about or looking at this week in this week's lesson, trying to find kind of monopolistic or oligopolistic positions versus trying to make profitability over through offering something new and different and valuable that others don't have, knowing that that's likely to eventually get competed away, but then seeing if you can come up with something else to earn your above normal profits or economic rents for a shorter period. Um, so you might want to take a look at that one. Finally, in the readings, I did post. It's been up there. An article that I wrote fairly recently with my father on kind of a bigger picture view of this. Certainly a speculative article, I think you would say, but kind of wondering about how we think about business and society and the role of people and what you do with it, and how that has kind of changed and altered over time. It's the Theory X versus Theory Y economics article, and you might want to take a look at that. And shifting gears now over to the discussion on strategy and performance. Again, a variety of good, interesting posts. Kind of fun to see people who had done different companies in the same industry comparing kind of what they found on their company versus what others found on theirs. That was good to see, uh, especially as people were kind of thinking about performance, though it does kind of raise this question that we have to kind of wrestle with, which is that performance is not a single measure, and you do want to think about what measures are you using, what are you comparing them to as you kind of judge the overall place of a company compared to its competitors and its place in the industry. So is that kind of the number of locations? Is that just a profit measure like return on sales or return on assets? Um, is it some kind of a measure of innovation or turnover? Uh, Lots of different things you can use that may tell kind of different stories. So think about what you're using and what you're comparing it to. As well, there's the notion of strategy. One of the things I think everybody needs to think about a little bit, and it's kind of a hard thing to wrestle with, is this notion of the how part of strategy. Uh, you know, I think that term may be a little misleading, although Grant uses it in the book. Um, but the how is really asking kind of what is our competitive advantage? All right, how are we positioned relative to other companies? I think of it, or I have found helpful to kind of use it as a question that says, look, why should people buy our products or services rather than anybody else's? Buyers typically have lots of choices. Um, why do we think that they should come buy from us rather than going to purchase from one of the many other places they could purchase their stuff? So it may be because we are the lowest price, maybe because we're the best quality, maybe a combination of those two things, good quality at a reasonable price. It may be our convenience, our image, we're the coolest, the hottest, the latest. Um, Maybe our innovation, maybe our service. Um, but all of those are ways to kind of answer this question of why they should buy from us rather than somebody else. In a number of instances in your posts on strategy, I was seeing people talk about the actions of the company, opening new locations, changing um, the distribution channel to more online versus brick and mortar, mixing up the types of products or services they were offering. Okay, all of those are fine actions, but go back and look at the Porter video from lesson one. And remember that all of those actions are not strategy in and of themselves. They are things that we hope are helping us reach our position of having a competitive advantage. All right, so if having more stores or locations allows us to reduce price and we're trying to compete on price, then that's a fine action to take. Just opening more stores to open more stores is not a strategy. So think about again that question of why should people buy from us rather than from somebody else as kind of the big piece of strategy. And I hope you'll keep that in mind as you do this week's lesson and you're looking at the industry. Because one of the things at the end of that is trying to come up with possible ways of competing in an industry. And for those, you should be thinking about, can you in this industry compete on price? Can you compete on quality? Can you compete on innovation? And perhaps even thinking about separating out would any of those positions really give you an advantage? Or are those simply things that you must address to just be in the industry and survive? Because those are two different things, right? Some industries you've got to get costs down, but competing on price alone may not get you there. So keep that in mind as you're going through this week's stuff. Overall, again, happy with where everybody is. I hope you all feel like you're getting something out of this, and I look forward to seeing the discussions and posts from this week's lesson.